Hi guys, Kale back again with another tips and tricks video, because let's be honest, that's what you guys tune in for, right? And I'll be honest too, the review videos are really just me just trying to figure out this whole video business stuff, because I might be good with the bricks, but I'm a bit of a Luddite when it comes to all this video stuff. There's a lot going on that needs to be worked out. Anyway, I guess that's probably just tip number one of the day, which is the first step to being good at anything is sucking at it. So let's get into talking about tips and tricks with the TimberWolf Challenge! Woo-woo! So I'm hanging out with my mates the other day. We're there to play D&D, but we're geeking out about Lego, and one of them says, "Hey, why don't you build the TimberWolf?" And I'm like, And that's the seed that started the challenge, right? But there's a little bit more to it than that, and I want to talk you through kind of the story of its creation. Because one of the things I want to do with these tips and tricks videos is not so much give you exact techniques as opposed to a process that you can go through to take whatever ideas you come up with and turn them into fully realised creations. And for those out there who might be saying, well, I struggle with ideas, how do you help me with that? Don't worry, we will have something coming up to tackle that as well very soon. So there we are. The challenge is laid down, build a TimberWolf. And the obvious question is, how? Well, sometimes that really is as easy as just striking on the right seed part. And in this case, it happened to be the Millennium Falcon cockpit you can see here with the 4x4 dome at the front, and it just really captured that iconic shape of the front of the TimberWolf perfectly for what I needed. And I let that dictate how I approached the build. But, like I said at the beginning, a big part of these tips and tricks videos is really about giving you an idea of how the process needs to work and making sure you know the right questions you're going to have to ask along the way. Because there's a really big reason I started with the upper half of the TimberWolf. And that's because I wanted to be fully posable, and when I got down to the legs, I needed it to be able to support all the weight. The easiest way to do that, of course, is knowing how much weight it needs to support by already having that top section done. Because here are some of the Lego hinge options that we have. Here we have the clicky version of the ball joints. Now they can hold a bit of weight, but not a lot, and especially for the knee joints they would have had problems here. There are, of course, your classic ball joints, which don't hold much weight whatsoever. There are Technic options to help support them a little stronger. You can use things like this in combination. But you can see it's a bit chunky and would have been too big for the leg. As it happens, most of the legs use the Technic hinge and they do the job. And yeah, we'll talk more about that as we get down to the latter half of the build, which was the legs. But yeah, I started with the iconic cockpit. The Millennium Falcon piece here made my life very easy, and started extending backwards and creating the upper body. And in about an hour, 2 hours, I'd gotten to this point. And I'll be honest, I wasn't very happy with the build at this stage. It's looking like just a big, lumpy, grey box. Sure, I was happy with the details inside the cockpit there, but that's an Easter egg. Nobody's ever going to see that unless I point it out to them. So I went to bed that night, and then at about 4 AM I woke up going, hey, I know how to finish this off. Yeah! And that's tip number 3 for the day. When your muse calls, you show up, right? And so I got up in the middle of the night and finished off the rocket pods, and I finished off the arms here, which are completely posable, as you can see. And about an hour or two later, I'd gotten to this point. And yeah, starting to feel quite happy with it at this point. It looks good. I brought in that little extra bit of texture around it to help it pop, I guess. And there's a little bit of playing with the colours, but keeping with the basic muted greys as well. You can also see the rocket fiery missiles, smoke missiles, These can actually be stacked quite long. They're just a very fragile connection, so I usually can't keep it at this length here. But it is a technique worth highlighting for those at home. With all of that in place, it was time to start tackling the legs, which I knew from the start was going to be the single toughest, hardest part of the build. Because as I said, it needs to support the weight of that upper body, right? It needs to be poseable. I'd like it to occasionally be able to step out and stuff. I needed the ankles to have that slight bit of roll left and right for when they do. And yeah, there's a lot of little technical things you need to think about as you go into that. And again, I don't want to lay down exact techniques to do it, because a very important part of this is experimenting with it and seeing what you can come up with. And I did. About 2 to 3 hours it took me for the legs, and that's figuring out the sizing and making sure it was to scale. So, okay, it's too thin now, let's separate it a little, let's separate it a little more. How do I make the legs? How long do they need to be? How big are those feet to keep them balanced? How far back, forth? These are all questions that need to go through your head, and really the best way to learn new techniques is just experiment and tackle that problem head on until you get something that works. I think it's also worth pointing out that one of the things that helps it work as a solution is making sure that you separate the internal structure there from the external kind of aesthetics. Make sure you leave attachment points for that stuff to be put on later, which is probably tip number 4 of the day. Always think about that next step and leave yourself room to bring that next step in. And quite often that just means having a few exposed bricks here or there, or stud points or whatever, so that you can come along and you can attach other bits later. And yeah, absolutely worth saying, more than a few errors were made along the way before I kind of got to this point. Never be afraid to make errors. Mistakes are where the learning happens. And so yeah, that's really how the challenge went. Took me about 7 hours to get the mech itself done, maybe a little less, and then maybe another 1 to 2 for the base you see underneath it. Yeah, it took longer than it looks, really, yeah. Yeah, and you probably could have gotten away without the base underneath, but I like the way it really helps frame the mech. Just like I really like the little Easter egg of Benny in there, because that feeds the imagination of anybody who looks upon the build, and I think that's an important part to have in anything you create. It's not just about you. Once you put it out there in the world, it becomes something for the viewers and the audience. And yeah, that's a very important part of the process. And I guess we're going to make that tip number 5 of the day. There is that element of putting it out there on display, sharing it with the world, and having at least a sense of how the audience is going to interact with it and see it, and what kind of experience you're looking to craft in that moment with your audience. And that may be one of the most important tips of them all, but it's not something you're immediately going to get out of the gate. It's just something you should be thinking about at every step along the way to kind of help you with the build, I guess. And so yeah, there we have it. The TimberWolf challenge. Started with a very simple seed part, thought about the challenges and questions I was going to have along the way, built on down till I got to the bottom, and well, been very well received. People are loving it, all around the world. Up on LEGO Ideas if you love it too and you want to see a Mech Warrior set, because a Mech Warrior set from LEGO would be cool, right? Yeah, let's get it out there, guys. Head over to LEGO Ideas, I'll put a link down below or something somewhere, and thanks for watching. I will see you very soon with another tips and tricks video. Cheers, guys. Stay awesome.